Sinestro. Hal.
Hey there, Marvelous viewers, welcome back to the channel. While we're only at the second episode of the show, I have to say that Lanterns is truly not wasting any time when it comes to bringing some of the most iconic Green Lantern characters to life. Even though we've been witnessing a rather grounded approach when it comes to portraying DC's galactic peacekeeper, the true detective-style superhero action is doing a banger job at keeping us hooked. We've already met two of the major villains of this episode, albeit for a split second. But what really got me intrigued was the not-so-casual name-dropping of who could be the main villain of this season. Having said that, the pilot episode has already set up Hal Jordan's death as it kept jumping across different timelines in order to cement its world building, and that surely shook down the entire structure of the series. It clearly will be a tough act to follow as Hal and Jon continue investigating the case of alien invasion in Rushville, while we know that the OG Green Lantern is about to die in the coming 10 years. Of course, we don't know why, and by the looks of it, the cliffhanger will be teasing us for a good few weeks. But as of now, let's discuss what happened in the end of Lanterns Episode 2, while trying to predict what could happen in the upcoming week. So without wasting any more time, let's get right into it.
I knew there was something about this place, and my gut is never wrong.
What happens in the latest episode of Lanterns? Sometimes I wonder if the Guardians even have an existing HR department, because if they did, Hal Jordan would probably think twice before putting Jon Stewart through so much shit. I mean, since the pilot episode, Hal has been pretty consistent in belittling his trainee, keeping him out of the loop when it comes to crucial information, or simply sending him off on errands that are either humiliating or downright dangerous. While Jon is probably wondering what he's even supposed to learn from this, as the next Green Lantern in line, I know a heckling when I see one. He really is in no better position than the new intern in the office, who gets smorgasborded with elaborate coffee orders for 20 people on their first week at work. But Jon has been taking it very well, even if the frustration from Hal's constant abuse is pretty evident on his face. Of course, Hal understands that and really does not let up as he throws a whole bucket of cold water on Jon to wake him up, and then tells the trainee that it's time to learn how to fly. Hal also does not provide any basic or useful instructions that could help Jon's first flight, because apparently that's just how Hal handles training. After a few failed attempts, all Jon manages to conjure is an emerald green bird, which continues following him even after he removes Hal's ring and travels halfway across the country. Judging by just how casually Hal reacts to this, you can tell that it's actually a pretty big deal. Anyway, Hal knew that the ring had no power left, so once again he was heckling the trainee before handing him a plane ticket, because Jon's main assignment this week is to retrieve the actual Green Lantern from his mansion in Coast City, which is one of the DC Universe's many fictional locations alongside Gotham City and Metropolis. Now, Hal keeps the ring inside a bizarre safe that has a pocket dimension inside, which opens only when he says the words, "Mogo doesn't socialize." That was surely hilarious, especially because I wasn't expecting that reference. For those who don't know, Mogo is actually another Green Lantern who happens to be a living planet, so you know, it's hard to socialize when you're a celestial body. Clearly, a regular safe is not good enough for a Green Lantern. Oh, and Hal also asks Jon to feed Earl on his way out, who just happens to be a very carnivorous alien plant, who looks like something straight out of Alien Earth, but the trainee has no clue what kind of pet Hal keeps, and I guess he was having fun being a jerk when he chose to let Jon be blindsided by it. However, this is a man raised by another abusive military man, so Jon always respects the chain of command even when it's unreasonable. He even packs up a Green Lantern suit for Hal before exchanging pleasantries with Earl and then leaving for Nebraska. Unfortunately, Jon and his bird, who he's supposed to keep alive till he can get the lantern back to Hal, are ambushed by two creepy men, and while the trainee does put up a good fight, he can only go so far against the aliens in disguise. As it turns out, Jon was kidnapped by Anton and his gang of aliens, and it was actually Anton's men who were shot at the football game in the Rushville High School football field. Jon couldn't follow whatever Anton kept rambling about until he mentioned how they were on Earth in search of Manhunter. Now that's surely above the trainee's pay grade, as he clearly has no idea what these aliens are talking about, especially because his teacher hasn't exactly spent a lot of time teaching him about the history of the Guardians, or even aliens for that matter. Anyway, Anton explains that the Manhunters actually existed before the Green Lanterns, and were much more ruthless in their idea of justice. They would infiltrate troubled planets by perfectly mimicking the people who lived there, only to wipe out entire alien civilizations. And as it turns out, Anton's people were also among them. In order to make sure Jon understood exactly what they were dealing with, the surviving aliens used some kind of device to force the memories of their planet's destruction directly into his mind. It's basically a Clockwork Orange treatment, except instead of watching the violence on a screen, Jon is made to experience an entire planetary genocide firsthand. And by the look of Jon's face, yes, it's really painful. Now, the aliens believe that the Guardians of the Universe secretly rescued the Manhunter responsible for destroying their world and have been hiding it ever since. Anton then frees Jon and hands him over a phone, only to give him 48 hours to find the Manhunter and contact them, or else the aliens would all regroup in the town square of Rushville and detonate themselves in a fashion that would blow up half of Nebraska in order to kill it. Luckily, Jon respects the chain of command, and even if Anton had specifically asked him not to, he tells Hal about the encounter. Together they start putting all the pieces together, only to realize that Abin-Sur, the Green Lantern who died in a ship crash before passing his ring on to Hal, may have been transporting the Manhunter to Earth. In fact, maybe the Manhunter is the one who killed Abin-Sur, and that it's somewhere in Rushville. It knows the aliens are getting close, and that's why the dead bodies may be piling up. Now it's up to Jon and Hal to find the Manhunter before the aliens start a carnage that could have irreversible consequences. Given everything we know about Hal, the idea that he's secretly working with the Manhunter seems pretty unlikely, as he spends most of the episode doing what Hal does best, which is causing problems for everyone around him. He keeps interrupting town meetings and generally drives Sheriff Carey crazy, although there's clearly some chemistry between them that Hal hasn't quite figured out yet. He also crosses a pretty major line by essentially becoming a grave robber, or should I say a morgue robber? Hal pulls the alien bodies out of the morgue, ignoring every possible rule because he wants to test a theory, and annoyingly for everyone involved, he's absolutely right. These metal detectors that Carey's father-in-law, William Macon, installed at the football stadium were actually not designed to detect metal at all, but rather built to detect aliens, which explains how the targets were identified in the first place. Naturally, this only makes Hal more interested in Macon, but as he drives the bodies toward the compound, Carey stops him on the way and tags along to make sure Hal does not end up creating more issues. But as usual, Hal completely undermines her and just marches onto the man's property, demanding answers about the incredibly advanced technology that even the Green Lantern himself has never seen anywhere else in the galaxy. There's also the mystery surrounding Macon's mysterious benefactor, whose name he will not reveal due to that pesky NDA he signed. Sadly, when Hal does not take no for an answer, Macon responds by shooting him straight through the shoulder for trespassing. Of course, the next stop for him is indeed a hospital, because the chargeless ring is clearly no good at protecting him from a bullet. I guess the real shocker comes when Hal wakes up to Carey waiting for him beside his bed, and as they start talking, both of them finally apologize for constantly stepping on each other's toes and interfering with each other's investigations. Carey also reveals that she's originally from Gotham City, which raises the inevitable question about how Kelly MacDonald is going to explain that Midwest accent. But as they leave, Hal's attention is quickly drawn to the fact that he's apparently the only patient in the entire hospital, despite the place being filled with brand new medical equipment, and naturally that makes him suspicious. Following this, Jon finally gets back only to find Hal all banged up. He brings him the lantern he asked for so he can recharge his ring, along with the Green Lantern uniform that Hal specifically told him not to bring. Surprisingly, Jon doesn't waste any time keeping secrets, and like I previously said, he tells Hal everything about his encounter with the aliens, including their search for a Manhunter and their belief that it's hiding somewhere in Rushville. Not only that, Jon also tells Hal what the aliens said about his strange green bird construct. Apparently, it's so advanced that creating something like it should be practically impossible, but Hal simply brushes it off. Before they call it a night, Hal asks if the bird signified something deeper, but Jon responds casually by crushing the bird in his hands, until it turns into a cloud of green dust. So much for getting emotionally attached to his creations. With that out of the way, Hal finally puts the uniform on. An absolutely iconic scene, might I add, and heads to the remote prison hidden inside a pocket dimension. This is where he finds Sinestro, played by Ulrich Thompson. I guess by now everyone knows that Sinestro was once a Green Lantern himself before he attempted a coup, killed one of the Guardians, and was ultimately taken down by Hal. The Green Lantern basically wanted to know everything Sinestro knew about the Manhunters, but according to the villain, they were the second biggest threat Hal is facing, which is obviously not the reassuring answer Hal was hoping for. But then Sinestro shifts the conversation in a much more interesting direction, as he asks Hal about John Stewart. Why is Sinestro's appearance such a big event for DC? As someone who's read a decent amount of Green Lantern comics, I wonder if that was actually the big Sinestro introduction we were looking for. I mean, the way Sinestro is positioned as kind of a Hannibal Lecter to Hal Jordan's Will Graham in Michael Mann's Manhunter is pretty obvious, but it works. He's the imprisoned killer whose capture made Hal's reputation while also leaving him psychologically scarred. So having the two face each other again immediately creates an interesting dynamic. It's not exactly the most original idea, just like Jon's powers going haywire during his first attempt at flying feels very Spider-Man 2-esque, but it's effective enough to get the point across. We know that Sinestro is important to Hal, as he kept repeating his name in his sleep at the hospital. While Hal won't explain why, apparently some of the basic details of Sinestro being the Green Lantern who attempted a coup, killing one of the Guardians before Hal took him down, is common knowledge. Now, in the comics, Hal Sinestro is a former Green Lantern from the planet Korugar in Space Sector 1417, who first appeared in Green Lantern Volume 2, Issue 7, all the way back in 1961. Sinestro's backstory is fascinating because, similar to Hal Jordan, his connection with the Green Lantern Corps began with a Green Lantern crash landing on his homeworld. Sinestro discovers the injured Lantern, Prol Gosgotha, near an anthropological site he was studying and borrows his ring to fight off Gosgotha's attacker, who was a Quardian. Sinestro then winds up using the ring to crush the Quardian with the ruins he was hitherto trying to restore. But when Sinestro returns to the crash, Gosgotha was still alive and asked for his ring back. However, Sinestro refused by letting the Green Lantern die and tricking the Guardians into believing he is the new ring's chosen one. Sinestro then quickly rises to become an incredibly successful and well-respected Green Lantern, who becomes famously known for maintaining peace in his sector by any means necessary. Of course, the main issue arrives when he eventually starts using the power of the ring to become an autocratic dictator to rule over all of Korugar. It's at this point when a young Hal Jordan was assigned to be Sinestro's trainee, and of course the two became close friends. But the more Hal learned about Sinestro's brutal methods, the more concerned he became, before eventually reporting Sinestro to the Guardians, who ended up imprisoning him. In the comics, Sinestro's story is actually a lot like Lucifer, as he's considered one of the greatest Green Lanterns before he rebelled against the Guardians, who disapproved of the heavy-handed tactics he used to dispense justice and protect his home planet. In fact, Sinestro had created his own opposing organization called the Sinestro Corps, whose members wielded yellow rings that were powered by fear. Because Sinestro trained Hal before all of this, it's likely that his betrayal was a big factor in how miserable the hero has become. As the series showed us in the pilot, Hal was far more optimistic and proud of being a Lantern in 1996 and in 2006, when he last backed up his conspicuousness as the hologram. But now, Hal does not want to get the Guardians involved in the investigation in Rushville, and mutters the Green Lantern oath as he recharges his ring in a way that makes it clear he no longer really believes it. While the hologram is excited to have a trainee, 2016 Hal hates the idea, probably because of how his own mentor-mentee relationship turned out. Who are the Manhunters? After the whole show that Anton puts up in order to convince Jon just how dangerous the Manhunters are, we learn that these are synthetic beings who can build new bodies and use them to infiltrate any society. They can also create powerful technology well beyond the capability of most species, and their twisted version of justice usually ends with wiping out an entire species, which is what led to the Holocaust on this planet. Sure, the Green Lantern Corps was established by an ancient, powerful alien species. They crafted power rings that allow people to create energy constructs with their willpower, and these rings typically choose their worthy wielders to serve as an interstellar cop. But the Green Lanterns were not their first attempt at maintaining order. It was, in fact, the Manhunters, who were basically androids programmed to combat evil throughout the universe. But as the Manhunters grew in power, they began to question their creators and also the value of organic life, whose emotions they saw as the seed of all crime they were created to stop. Because they massacred entire planets, the Guardians had to destroy them. But some survived by disguising themselves, and even Hal does not seem to know much about this dark chapter in the history of the Guardians. So he goes to Sinestro to find out everything about this Manhunter. The existence of a pocket dimension could mean more DCU connections. So another big reveal in the episode happened at Hal Jordan's house, and yes, I'm talking about the safe which holds the lantern. That too inside a pocket dimension. That might seem like a small detail, but it actually fits into a pattern that the new DCU has already been building. Both Superman and Peacemaker Season 2 have made pocket dimensions and alternate realities important parts of their stories, and Lanterns only appear to be carrying that idea forward. In Superman, we see Lex Luthor create an entire pocket universe to imprison people who stand in his way, including Superman. When the portal connecting that universe to Earth starts to collapse, it creates a massive rift that threatens to tear through Metropolis. Then Peacemaker Season 2 takes the idea even further, with Peacemaker entering the quantum unfolding chamber, and eventually ending up on the prison planet Salvation. With Lanterns now introducing another pocket dimension, it increasingly feels like this could be one of the connective threads running through Chapter 1 of the DCU. What initially looks like a recurring sci-fi concept may actually be part of a larger story James Gunn and DC are building across these projects. What can we expect from the next episode of Lanterns? So of course I have a few theories, but from the looks of the preview of episode 3, I guess we'll be largely focusing on Jon Stewart's character next week. The episode teaser clearly has some violent shots of him being raised in an abusive home and possibly losing his mother to his father's constant abuse. There's also a scene of a green light flashing on his face as a baby, which will probably give us the story of how he was the chosen one. More so, I think he will finally meet a Guardian next week who will ask him to overthrow Hal Jordan for complying with the rules of the Guardians. Of course, Jon will be torn between which path to follow, but he's the man who respects the chain of command, so I wouldn't be surprised if he actually walks into that trap and ends up trying to replace Hal. That will clearly lead to a lot of bad blood between them, which explains why Jon seems to have no clue about Hal in the 2026 timeline, as they probably hadn't spoken in years. Maybe this is also why Sinestro calls the Manhunters Sal's second greatest threat, before asking to hear more about Jon Stewart, who might be shaping up to be the biggest threat to Hal's mantle. Moreover, the existence of the Manhunters are already proving that the Guardians of the Universe are not the all-knowing, benevolent peacekeepers they pretend to be. If they're willing to break protocol and hand Hal the ring when he was a trainee, instead of letting the ring choose its next bearer, there's clearly something bigger going on behind the scenes. Whatever the Guardians have planned for Hal, it's probably not going to end well. Plus, there's the whole thing with Jon's powers and how they work. Jon has clearly gotten an ego boost from Anton after realizing that his powers continue to work without the ring, which is a very new concept. In the comics, Jon Stewart eventually develops the ability to channel Green Lantern energy without needing a physical ring. After his ring is destroyed, Jon becomes bonded to the Green Lantern energy at a cellular level, with his body effectively becoming the ring and his heart functioning as the entire power battery. This allows him to create hard, light constructs, project energy, fly, and withstand tremendous damage without wearing a ring. His abilities are still fueled by willpower, but the energy now comes from within him rather than an external power ring. That's why Hal is shocked to see the trainee maintaining a construct without the ring, as if it was an advanced ability that Jon shouldn't possess yet. The show hasn't fully explained how Jon can do this, but it strongly suggests there's something inherently different about its connection to Green Lantern power, which we'll probably see in the next episode. Lastly, there's the gnawing question of who the Manhunter is, and I think it's this benefactor that William Macon is hiding, which is probably how he has access to such advanced tech in the first place. In fact, I think the Manhunter could even be Macon's wife Zoe, who somehow is in a marriage of convenience as she tells Jon and is getting something out of William that she cannot find anywhere else. They're also in love, which would certainly explain why Macon gets so defensive whenever aliens come up. But that's just my 2 cents. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comment box down below.